The notice on the door of Delilah's fine dresses fluttered in the dusty Wyoming wind like a white flag of surrender, announcing that the bank would seize the property in exactly 7 days, unless the outstanding debt of $300 could be paid in full. Delilah Crawford stood inside her shop on that scorching August morning in 1882. Running her trembling fingers over the bolt of emerald silk she had ordered from San Francisco before her world had collapsed. The fabric had cost her nearly $50, money she no longer had, and now it sat like a beautiful reminder of her foolishness. She was 24 years old, and everything she had worked for since arriving in Cheyenne 3 years ago was crumbling like the dry earth outside her window. The bell above her door chimed, and Delilah quickly wiped her eyes, forcing a smile onto her face as she turned to greet whoever had entered. She expected to see one of her regular customers, perhaps Mrs. Henderson coming to collect the dress she had ordered last month, or maybe young Sarah Miller looking at ribbons she could not afford. Instead, a cowboy stood in her doorway. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled the frame and blocked out the harsh sunlight behind him. Dust covered his boots and the lower half of his dark trousers, and his hat cast a shadow over his face. For a moment, Delilah felt a flutter of fear, wondering if this was some drifter looking for trouble, but then he removed his hat, and she saw his face clearly. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that needed a trim. His eyes were a startling shade of blue, like the sky just before sunset, and there was something almost gentle in the way he looked around her shop, taking in the dresses hanging on display, the ribbons and lace arranged on the counter, the sewing machine in the corner that had been her most prized possession. "Madam," he said, his voice deep and respectful, "I am looking for the proprietor of this establishment." "That would be me," Delilah said, straightening her shoulders and trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Delilah Crawford, how may I help you?" The cowboy stepped further into the shop, and Delilah noticed that despite the dust on his clothing, there was a quality to his attire that spoke of means. His shirt was well made, his belt buckle was silver, and his boots, though worn, were of fine leather. He held his hat in his hands and looked at her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. "My name is James Thornton," he said. "I own a ranch about 15 miles north of here. I have been in town conducting business, and I happened to notice the sign on your door." Delilah felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. Of course he had seen it. Everyone in Cheyenne had probably seen it by now, evidence of her failure displayed for all to witness. "I see," she said quietly, looking down at her hands. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Crawford," James said. "I would like to purchase this property and settle your debt with the bank." Delilah's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. "Purchase it? But why would you want a dress shop?" "I do not particularly want a dress shop," James said, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "But I do want this building. It is in a good location, and I have been looking for a property in town for some time now. As for what happens to the dress shop itself, that would be up to you." "Up to me," Delilah repeated, confused. "I do not understand." James walked closer to the counter, setting his hat down on the polished wood. "I will pay off your debt and purchase the building outright. In exchange, you will continue to operate your dress shop here, paying me rent instead of the bank. The rent will be reasonable, I assure you." $50 per month. Delilah's mind raced. $50 per month was actually less than what she had been paying the bank when she was current on her payments. But there had to be a catch. Men did not simply appear out of nowhere offering to solve all your problems without wanting something in return. "What else?" she asked, her voice suspicious. "What else would you want from me?" James looked at her steadily, and she saw no deception in his blue eyes. "I want you to make me a suit," he said simply. "The finest suit you are capable of making. I have a business meeting in Denver in 6 weeks, and I need to look like more than just a cattle rancher. I need to look like a man who belongs in a boardroom." Delilah stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You want to buy my building, pay off my $300 debt, and all you want in return is a suit." "Not just any suit," James said. "The finest suit you can make. I have seen the work you do, Miss Crawford. My sister purchased a dress from you last year for her wedding. She lives in Denver now, but she still talks about that dress. She says it was the most beautiful thing she ever wore." Something warm bloomed in Delilah's chest at his words. She remembered that dress, a confection of ivory satin and French lace that had taken her nearly 3 weeks to complete. "Mary Thornton was your sister." "Mary Caldwell now," James said with a nod. "She married a banker from Denver. I am going to visit her and her husband, and while I am there, I have meetings with several investors who are interested in expanding their cattle operations into Wyoming. I need to make a good impression." Delilah's hands were shaking again, but this time it was not from despair. It was from the sudden, overwhelming rush of hope that flooded through her. "You are serious. This is not some kind of jest." "I do not jest about business, Miss Crawford," James said. "I am prepared to go to the bank today and settle your debt. I have already spoken with Mr. Peterson about purchasing this property. He is drawing up the papers as we speak. All I need is your agreement." "But why?" Delilah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" James was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes searching her face. "My father lost everything in a bad business deal when I was 16 years old," he finally said. "I watched it destroy him. He was never the same after that. He died 2 years later, and I always believed it was the shame and the failure that killed him more than any illness. I built my ranch from nothing, Miss Crawford. I worked as a ranch hand, saved every penny, and eventually bought my own land. I know what it is to lose everything, and I know what it is to fight your way back. If I can help someone avoid that kind of despair, and all it costs me is an investment in a good property and a well-made suit, then it seems like a fair trade." Delilah felt tears prickling at her eyes again, but these were different from the tears she had shed earlier. "Mr. Thornton, I do not know what to say." "Say yes," James said simply. "Say you will make me the finest suit you have ever made, and say you will continue to run this dress shop and make it successful." "Yes," Delilah breathed. "Yes, of course. Yes to all of it." James smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his entire face and made him look younger and somehow more approachable. "Good. Then we have a deal, Miss Crawford. I will return later this afternoon with the papers for you to sign. In the meantime, perhaps you should take down that notice on your door." He picked up his hat and placed it back on his head, tipping it to her in a gesture of farewell. As he walked toward the door, Delilah found herself speaking before she could think better of it. "Mr. Thornton, wait. When would you like to begin the fittings for your suit?" James turned back to her, his hand on the door handle. "Whenever you have time, Miss Crawford. I am staying at the hotel in town for the next few days while I conduct my business here. After that, I will return to my ranch, but I can ride into town whenever you need me." "Tomorrow," Delilah suggested. "If you could come by tomorrow morning, I can take your measurements and we can discuss what style you are looking for." "Tomorrow morning it is," James agreed. "Shall we say 10 o'clock? 10 o'clock would be perfect," Delilah said. After James left, Delilah stood in the middle of her shop for several long minutes, hardly daring to believe what had just happened. Then she rushed to the door and tore down the notice, crumpling it in her hands. She felt like laughing and crying at the same time. Just an hour ago, she had been contemplating what she would do when she lost everything. Now, impossibly, she had been given a second chance. That evening, Delilah sat at her small table in the living quarters behind her shop and wrote a letter to her sister in Boston. Rebecca had married well and had been encouraging Delilah to give up on her dress shop and come live with her and her husband, where they could find her a suitable husband, and she could live a respectable life. Delilah had always resisted, wanting to make her own way in the world, but she had to admit that in recent weeks she had been close to accepting Rebecca's offer. Now everything had changed. She told her sister about James Thornton, about his incredible offer, and about the suit she would be making. As she wrote, she realized she was smiling. It had been a long time since she had felt this kind of excitement about her work. The pressure of the debt had been crushing her creativity, making every stitch feel like a burden. Now, knowing she had a future, she felt inspired again. She pulled out her sketchbook and began drawing designs for James's suit. She wanted to create something that would showcase her skill while still being appropriate for a businessman. She sketched jacket styles, considered different types of fabric, and made notes about measurements she would need to take. By the time she finally climbed into bed well after midnight, she had filled several pages with ideas. Sleep did not come easily. Her mind kept returning to James Thornton, to his blue eyes and the gentle way he had spoken about his father's losses. There was something about him that intrigued her, something beyond his generous offer. He seemed like a man who understood struggle, who had known hardship and overcome it. She respected that. She respected him. The next morning, Delilah woke early and spent extra time on her appearance. She told herself it was simply because she wanted to look professional for an important client, but she knew there was more to it than that. She chose her best dress, a practical but flattering design in deep blue cotton, and arranged her auburn hair in a neat bun at the nape of her neck. She even pinched her cheeks to bring color to them, something she had not done in months. James arrived promptly at 10 o'clock, and Delilah noticed that he had cleaned up considerably since the day before. His clothes were dust-free, his hair was neatly combed, and he smelled faintly of soap and leather. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm. "Good morning, Miss Crawford," he said. "I have the papers here for you to sign, along with the receipt from the bank showing your debt has been paid in full." Delilah's hands trembled slightly as she took the documents from him and read through them carefully. True to his word, James had purchased the building and paid off her debt. The rental agreement was more than fair, and there was even a clause stating that she would have the first option to purchase the building back from him if she ever wished to do so. "This is incredibly generous," she said, looking up at him. "The option to buy back the property, I mean, you did not have to include that." James shrugged. "It seemed only fair. This is your business, Miss Crawford, your dream. If you want to own it outright again someday, you should have that opportunity." Delilah signed the papers with a hand that was steadier than she expected. When she finished, James countersigned them and handed her a copy for her own records. "Now then," he said, looking around the shop. "Shall we discuss this suit?" Delilah led him to the area where she usually took measurements, a small alcove separated from the main shop by a silk screen. She had her measuring tape ready, along with her notebook full of sketches from the night before. "Before I take your measurements, I would like to understand what you are looking for," she said, opening her notebook. "You mentioned a business meeting in Denver. Will this be a formal affair?" "Relatively formal," James said. "I will be meeting with bankers and railroad investors. These are men who judge you by your appearance before you ever open your mouth. I need to look successful, established, but not ostentatious. I am still a rancher at heart, Miss Crawford. I do not want to look like I am pretending to be something I am not." Delilah nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. She flipped through her sketches and showed him several designs. "I was thinking something classic, but with fine details that speak to quality. A three-piece suit in a dark wool, perhaps charcoal or deep navy. A subtle pinstripe might work well. It would be sophisticated without being flashy." James studied the sketches with more interest than she expected. "You have a good eye," he said. "I like this one here with the slightly longer jacket, and yes to the pinstripe, but keep it subtle." "I have a beautiful wool fabric that arrived from Chicago last spring," Delilah said, feeling her excitement grow. "It is exactly what you are describing. Charcoal gray with the faintest navy pinstripe. You would hardly notice it unless you were looking closely, but it adds depth and interest to the fabric." "That sounds perfect," James said. "May I see it?" Delilah retrieved the bolt of fabric from her storage room, silently thanking her past self for investing in quality materials even when money was tight. She unrolled a section of the wool and handed it to James, watching as he examined it carefully. His hands were rough and calloused from ranch work, but he handled the fine fabric with surprising gentleness. "This is excellent quality," he said. "You have good taste in materials." "Thank you," Delilah said, pleased by the compliment. "Shall I take your measurements now?" James nodded and stood still as Delilah began to measure him. She had measured many men before for shirts and vests, but there was something different about this encounter. Perhaps it was the intimacy of the small space, or the way James stood so still and patient, or simply the fact that she was acutely aware of him in a way she had not been aware of other clients. She could feel the warmth radiating from his body as she stretched the measuring tape across his broad shoulders. She noticed the way his muscles tensed slightly when she measured around his chest, and the steady rise and fall of his breathing as she worked. "You are quite tall," she said, making notes in her book. "I will need to be careful with the proportions of the jacket." "Is that a problem?" James asked. "Not at all," Delilah assured him. "It just means I need to pay extra attention to make sure everything is balanced properly. You want the jacket to emphasize your shoulders without making you look too broad, and the length needs to be right so your legs do not look disproportionate." "I trust your judgment," James said simply. Those 4 words meant more to Delilah than he could possibly know. It had been a long time since anyone had trusted her judgment about anything important. She found herself working with extra care, double-checking every measurement to make sure she had it exactly right. When she finished, she stepped back and reviewed her notes. "I should have the suit ready for a first fitting in about 2 weeks. That will give me time to cut the fabric and do the initial construction. The first fitting is crucial because that is when we will make sure the proportions are correct and identify any adjustments that need to be made." 2 weeks is fine," James said. "I will be back at my ranch by then, but I can ride in whenever you need me. Just send word to the Thornton Ranch, about 15 miles north on the old cattle trail. Anyone in town can give you more specific directions." "I will send word when I am ready for you," Delilah promised. James settled his hat back on his head and prepared to leave, but he paused at the door. "Miss Crawford, I want you to know that I meant what I said yesterday. I have faith that you will make this business successful. Do not let fear hold you back. Take chances. Create beautiful things. That is what you are meant to do." After he left, Delilah stood holding her notebook and feeling as though something fundamental had shifted in her world. James Thornton was not like any man she had ever met. There was a steadiness about him, a quiet strength that made her feel safe. And beyond that, there was a kindness in him that seemed genuine and unforced. She shook her head, trying to clear it of such thoughts. James was her landlord and her client, nothing more. She needed to focus on making him the finest suit she had ever created, both because she owed him that much, and because she wanted to prove to herself that she still had the skill and creativity that had brought her to Cheyenne in the first place. Over the next 2 weeks, Delilah threw herself into her work with a passion she had not felt in months. She carefully cut the charcoal wool, making sure every piece was precisely aligned to take advantage of the subtle pinstripe. She constructed the jacket with painstaking attention to detail, hand-stitching the lapels and reinforcing the shoulders with a padding technique she had learned from a French tailor in Boston. She made the vest to fit snugly but comfortably, with a subtle pattern in the lining that would only be visible when James opened his jacket. She crafted the trousers to break perfectly over his boots, with a crease that would stay sharp through hours of wear. While she worked on James's suit, her regular business picked up as well. Word had spread that the dress shop was no longer closing, and customers who had been hesitant to place orders began coming back. Mrs. Henderson collected her dress and ordered another. Sarah Miller bought those ribbons she had been admiring. A new customer came in and ordered a wedding dress, and Delilah felt her confidence growing with each completed project. She also found herself thinking about James more often than she cared to admit. She wondered what he was doing at his ranch, whether he was thinking about his suit or about her, whether he had as much trouble getting her out of his mind as she had getting him out of hers. She told herself she was being foolish, that a man like James Thornton probably had women interested in him from here to Denver, but she could not quite stop the flutter in her chest when she thought about seeing him again. When the suit was ready for the first fitting, Delilah sent a message to the Thornton ranch with a young boy who made deliveries around town. She asked if James could come into Cheyenne the following Tuesday morning. The boy returned that evening with a note written in a strong, clear hand. "I will be there at 10 o'clock. Looking forward to seeing your work." J.T. Delilah read the note 3 times before tucking it into her pocket, telling herself she was being ridiculous for saving it. Tuesday morning arrived bright and clear, with a cool breeze that hinted at the approaching autumn. Delilah had the suit ready, hanging on her dress form with all the components carefully pressed and prepared. She had also, though she tried not to think too much about it, taken extra care with her appearance again. She wore her best day dress, a soft gray with pink accents, and left her hair slightly softer than usual, with a few curls framing her face. James arrived right at 10, and Delilah's heart did an unexpected flip when she saw him walk through her door. He looked good, she thought, healthy and strong and somehow even more handsome than she remembered. "Miss Crawford," he said, removing his hat and smiling at her. "It is good to see you again." "Good to see you as well, Mr. Thornton," Delilah replied, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "I have your suit ready for the first fitting. Would you like to see it?" She gestured to the dress form, and James walked over to examine the suit. He was quiet for a long moment, and Delilah felt nervousness building in her chest. What if he did not like it? What if she had misunderstood what he wanted? "Miss Crawford," James finally said, his voice quiet with what sounded like awe. "This is extraordinary. I have never seen workmanship like this." Relief and pride swelled through Delilah in equal measure. "You have not even tried it on yet. We still need to see how it fits." "Then I should try it on," James agreed. "Where should I change?" Delilah directed him to a small changing room she had set up in the back of the shop. She waited nervously while he changed, her fingers twisting together as she mentally reviewed all the measurements she had taken. She had been so careful, but there was always the possibility that she had made an error, that something would not fit properly. When James emerged from the changing room, Delilah felt her breath catch in her throat. The suit transformed him completely. He was no longer just a handsome cowboy. He looked like a man of substance, someone important and successful. The jacket emphasized his broad shoulders perfectly. The vest hugged his torso in exactly the right way, and the trousers fell in clean, elegant lines. But more importantly, he still looked like himself. The suit enhanced who he was rather than trying to turn him into something else. "Well," James asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "How does it look? Turn around," Delilah said, walking in a circle around him and examining every detail. "Let me see the fit." She checked the shoulders, making sure there were no pulls or wrinkles. She examined the way the jacket fell across his back and how the sleeves hung at his wrists. She looked at the break of the trousers over his boots and the line of the vest at his waist. Everything was nearly perfect, but there were a few small adjustments that needed to be made. "The fit is very good," she said, pulling out a box of pins. "But I need to make a few minor adjustments. The left shoulder sits slightly higher than the right, which is completely normal. Most people are not perfectly symmetrical. I need to adjust for that. And I want to take the waist in just a fraction on the jacket. May I pin the changes?" "Of course," James said. Delilah began pinning the adjustments, acutely aware of how close she was standing to James. She could smell the clean scent of him, a mixture of soap and sun-warmed cotton and something that was uniquely his own. She tried to focus on her work, but she found her hands were not quite steady. "You are very skilled at this," James said quietly. "Where did you learn to tailor like this?" "My grandmother was a seamstress in Boston," Delilah replied, grateful for the distraction of conversation. "She taught me everything she knew. She could look at a person and know exactly how to cut fabric to flatter their figure. It was like magic. I spent every day after school in her workshop, learning from her. When she died, she left me her sewing machine and enough money to start my own business. That is how I ended up here." "Why Cheyenne?" James asked. "Why not stay in Boston?" Delilah carefully pinned the shoulder adjustment before answering. "Boston felt suffocating. Everyone knew me as poor Mary Crawford's granddaughter, the girl whose parents died in a house fire when she was 8. There were expectations about what I should do, who I should marry. My sister wanted me to marry her husband's business partner, a man twice my age who I found utterly insufferable. I wanted to go somewhere I could be my own person, where I could build something that was mine. Cheyenne seemed like a place where someone could start fresh. And has it been?" James asked. "A fresh start, I mean." Delilah stepped back to examine her pinning work. "It has been harder than I expected. I underestimated how expensive it would be to establish a business, and I overestimated how quickly I could build a customer base. I made mistakes. But I have also created things I am proud of. I have customers who trust me and appreciate my work. And now, thanks to you, I have a chance to keep building instead of losing everything." "You would have found a way," James said with certainty, "even without my help. You have too much determination to fail." Delilah looked up at him, surprised by the conviction in his voice. "You do not know me well enough to say that." "I know enough," James said, his blue eyes steady on hers. "I know you came to a frontier town alone and built a business from nothing. I know you did not give up even when things got difficult. I know you put your heart into your work. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are, Miss Crawford." Delilah felt warmth spreading through her chest, a sensation that had nothing to do with the sunny day. She looked away, flustered. "You can change back now. I have all the adjustments marked. The suit should be ready for the final fitting in about a week." "A week," James repeated. "That is fast. You said you need it in 6 weeks," Delilah reminded him. "I want to make sure we have plenty of time for any final adjustments and for me to press everything perfectly." James disappeared back into the changing room, and Delilah let out a long breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She needed to get control of herself. These feelings she was developing for James Thornton were dangerous and foolish. He was a wealthy rancher, a man of property and substance. She was a seamstress who had nearly lost everything. Even though he had been kind to her, that did not mean he had any interest in her beyond a business relationship. When James emerged in his regular clothes, he seemed reluctant to leave. He lingered by the counter, his hat in his hands, as though he had something more he wanted to say. "Miss Crawford," he finally said, "I wonder if you might join me for dinner this evening. There is a restaurant at the hotel that serves excellent food, and I would enjoy the company." Delilah's heart leaped, but she forced herself to consider the invitation carefully. "Mr. Thornton, I am not sure that would be appropriate. You are my landlord and my client. I am also a man who would very much like to have dinner with an interesting woman," James said simply. "But if you are uncomfortable with the idea, I understand." "I do not want to put you in an awkward position." Delilah looked at his face, at the sincerity in his blue eyes, and made a decision. "I would be happy to have dinner with you, Mr. Thornton. What time shall I meet you?" 7 o'clock, James suggested. "And Miss Crawford, perhaps we could dispense with the formalities. You could call me James." "Then you should call me Delilah," she replied, feeling a smile spreading across her face. "Delilah," James repeated, and something about the way he said her name, soft and warm, made her knees feel weak. "I will see you at 7. After he left, Delilah stood in the middle of her shop and pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks. She had a dinner engagement with James Thornton. It was not a courtship, she told herself firmly. It was just dinner. Two people sharing a meal and conversation. Nothing more. But when 7 o'clock came and she found herself walking into the hotel restaurant wearing her finest dress, the emerald green one she had made for herself last year and rarely had occasion to wear, she knew she was lying to herself. This felt like more than just dinner. This felt like the beginning of something. James stood when he saw her enter, and the way his eyes widened when he saw her made all the time she had spent on her appearance worthwhile. "Delilah," he said, pulling out a chair for her, "you look beautiful." "Thank you," she said, settling into the chair and trying not to let her nervousness show. "This is a lovely restaurant. I have walked past it many times but never had occasion to dine here." The restaurant was indeed lovely, with white tablecloths and gleaming silverware and soft lamplight that made everything feel warm and intimate. James ordered wine, something Delilah rarely indulged in, and they studied the menu together while making small talk about the weather and the town. But once they had ordered their meals, James leaned forward and looked at her with such direct intensity that Delilah felt her breath catch. "I want to know more about you," he said. "The real you, not just the businesswoman who makes beautiful clothes. Tell me something true about yourself, Delilah Crawford." Delilah took a sip of her wine, considering the question. "Something true," she repeated. "All right. I am afraid most of the time. I am afraid I am not good enough, that I will fail, that I made a terrible mistake coming west. I put on a brave face because that is what you have to do when you are a woman trying to run a business in a town like this. But underneath, I am terrified that one day everyone will realize I am just pretending to know what I am doing." James was quiet for a moment, and Delilah worried she had revealed too much. But then he reached across the table and took her hand, his rough fingers warm against her smooth ones. "That is the bravest thing I have ever heard anyone say," he said. "Being afraid and doing it anyway. That is real courage, Delilah, not the absence of fear but the refusal to let fear win." "Is that how you felt when you started your ranch?" Delilah asked. "Every single day," James admitted. "I was 22 years old with a small plot of land and 12 head of cattle I had saved 3 years to buy. I had no idea if I could make it work. My mother thought I was crazy. My sister thought I would end up broke and broken like our father, but I had to try. I could not spend the rest of my life wondering what if. And now you have a successful ranch, Delilah said. You made it work. I did, James agreed. But it was not easy, and there were times I came close to losing everything. A bad winter my second year killed half my herd. A drought the year after that nearly finished me off. I had to take work as a ranch hand on other people's properties just to keep my land. But I refused to give up. And slowly, year by year, things got better. I bought more cattle. I hired a few good men. I expanded my grazing land. I built a decent house. And now I have something I am proud of. Their food arrived, and they ate while continuing to talk. Delilah found herself relaxing, the wine and the warmth of the restaurant and James's easy manner combining to make her feel more comfortable than she had felt in a long time. They talked about everything and nothing. Books they had read, places they wanted to see, memories from their childhoods, dreams for the future. I want to expand beyond just dresses, Delilah confessed over dessert. I want to offer full tailoring services for both men and women. I want to be known for quality workmanship, the kind of clothes that last for years and never go out of style. I want people to come from all over Wyoming to my shop. They will, James said with certainty. Once word spreads about the quality of your work, you will have more business than you can handle. You might need to hire help. Perhaps, Delilah said, the idea exciting and terrifying in equal measure. But first I need to make sure I can keep up with my current rent and expenses. You will, James said. I have faith in you. Those words again. I have faith in you. Delilah wondered if James understood how much they meant to her, how they filled up empty spaces inside her that she had not even realized were there. When dinner was over, James walked her back to her shop through the darkened streets of Cheyenne. The town was quiet at this hour, with only the occasional sound of music from one of the saloons breaking the stillness. James kept a respectful distance, but Delilah found herself wishing he would take her arm, would close the space between them. At the door to her shop, James stopped and turned to face her. Thank you for joining me tonight, Delilah. I enjoyed it very much. I did too, Delilah said honestly. More than I expected to. James smiled at that. I hope we can do it again. I will be back in town next week for the final fitting. Perhaps we could have dinner again then. I would like that, Delilah said. They stood there for a moment longer, and Delilah thought James might kiss her. She could see the desire in his eyes, the way his gaze dropped to her lips. But instead he took her hand and brought it to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Good night, Delilah, he said softly. Good night, James, she whispered back. She watched him walk away down the street before letting herself into her shop, her hand tingling where his lips had touched her skin. She was in trouble, she realized. She was falling for James Thornton, and she had no idea if he felt the same way or if she was just a pleasant diversion for him. The week that followed was both the longest and the shortest of Delilah's life. She threw herself into finishing James's suit, making every stitch perfect, pressing every seam with meticulous care. She also worked on her other orders with renewed energy, staying up late into the night to complete a dress for Mrs. Henderson's daughter, and starting on the wedding dress that would be her most ambitious project yet. But through it all, she thought about James. She replayed their dinner conversation in her mind, analyzing every word and gesture. She touched her hand where he had kissed it and felt that same flutter in her chest. She told herself she needed to be careful to protect her heart, but she could feel herself falling anyway. When Tuesday came and James walked through her door at precisely 10 o'clock, Delilah felt as though her heart might burst right out of her chest. He looked at her with such warmth in his eyes that she almost forgot about the suit, almost forgot about everything except the way he made her feel. Good morning, he said. I have been looking forward to this all week. The fitting, Delilah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "The fitting," James agreed. "And seeing you again." The final fitting went smoothly. The adjustments Delilah had made were perfect, and the suit fit James like it had been painted onto his body. He looked magnificent, and from the way he studied himself in the mirror, Delilah could tell he was pleased. "This is perfect," he said. "Absolutely perfect." "You have outdone yourself, Delilah." "I am glad you are pleased," she said. "I will do the final pressing and have it ready for you by the end of the week. Your trip to Denver is in 3 weeks, correct?" "Yes," James said, "which gives us 3 weeks." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Delilah, I need to be honest with you about something. I did not buy this building just because it was a good investment. I bought it because I wanted an excuse to see you again. I wanted a reason to keep coming back to Cheyenne." Delilah's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "James, I know this is fast," James continued. "I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I cannot stop thinking about you. You are in my head from the moment I wake up until I fall asleep at night. I find myself riding into town on the flimsiest of excuses, just hoping I might catch a glimpse of you. And I need to know if I am alone in feeling this way, or if you feel it too." Delilah looked at him, at the vulnerability in his blue eyes, and felt something break open inside her. All her carefully constructed walls, all her determination to protect her heart, crumbled in the face of his honesty. "You are not alone," she whispered. "I feel it too. I have been trying so hard not to, telling myself it was foolish and dangerous, but I cannot help it. When I am with you, I feel like everything makes sense, like all the struggles and the fear and the hard work was leading me to exactly this moment." James closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He cupped her face in his hands, his calloused palms gentle against her skin. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. "Yes," Delilah breathed. His lips met hers in a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a kiss that felt like a promise. Delilah melted into him, her hands clutching at his shirt, her head spinning with the intensity of it. She had been kissed before, but never like this. Never with this feeling of rightness of coming home. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. "Come to my ranch," he said. "Come see where I live. I want to show you my world, Delilah. I want you to be part of it." "When?" Delilah asked. "This Sunday," James said. "I will come get you early in the morning. We can spend the whole day together. I will show you the ranch, introduce you to my men, and we can talk about what this means, about what we both want." Delilah nodded, unable to form words. Her life had changed so completely in such a short time. A month ago, she had been on the verge of losing everything. Now she had a successful business and a man she was falling in love with, wanting to take her to his home. "Sunday," she agreed. "I will be ready." James kissed her once more, a quick, sweet kiss that left her wanting more. Then he changed back into his regular clothes and prepared to leave, though Delilah could tell he was as reluctant to go as she was to see him leave. "I will be counting the days until Sunday," he said at the door. "So will I," Delilah replied. The days until Sunday crawled by at a torturous pace. Delilah finished James's suit and wrapped it carefully in paper, preparing it for when he would need it for his trip to Denver. She completed Mrs. Henderson's daughter's dress and began the intricate beadwork on the wedding dress. She kept busy, but her mind was always on Sunday, on James, on what might happen between them. Sunday morning dawned clear and beautiful, with the kind of perfect late summer weather that made everything seem possible. Delilah dressed carefully in her most practical dress, knowing she would be visiting a working ranch, but she still wanted to look pretty. She arranged her hair in a simple style and added a touch of color to her cheeks and lips. James arrived at 8 o'clock driving a wagon rather than riding a horse. "I thought you would be more comfortable this way," he explained as he helped her up onto the seat. "It is about an hour's ride to the ranch." They drove out of Cheyenne and into the vast Wyoming landscape, the road winding through grasslands that stretched as far as the eye could see. James pointed out landmarks along the way, a creek where he sometimes fished, a distinctive rock formation that helped travelers navigate the boundary where his property began. "I own about 5,000 acres," he explained. "It is not the biggest ranch in Wyoming, but it is mine. I have about 800 head of cattle right now, and my herd is growing every year. I have 4 full-time ranch hands and bring on extra help during roundup and branding season." As they drove onto his property, Delilah could see cattle grazing in the distance and the shapes of buildings ahead. When they got closer, she saw that the main house was a solid 2-story structure built of timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. It was not fancy, but it looked sturdy and well-maintained. Near the house were a large barn, several corrals, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. "It is beautiful," Delilah said honestly. "You have built something really wonderful here, James." James helped her down from the wagon, and Delilah could see the pride in his face as he looked around his property. "Would you like a tour?" he asked. He showed her everything. The barn with its neat rows of stalls and the sweet smell of hay, the corrals where they broke horses and sorted cattle, the bunkhouse where his men lived. He introduced her to his ranch hands, 4 weathered cowboys who treated James with a respect that was clearly earned rather than demanded. They tipped their hats to Delilah and welcomed her politely, though she could see the curiosity in their eyes. But it was the house that captured Delilah's heart. James led her inside, and she found herself in a spacious main room with a stone fireplace, comfortable furniture, and large windows that let in plenty of light. The room was tidy but unmistakably masculine, with no woman's touch anywhere to be seen. "I know it is a bachelor's quarters," James said, sounding almost apologetic. "My sister has been after me for years to let her come decorate, but I never saw the point. It is just me here most of the time." "It is lovely," Delilah said, walking to the window and looking out at the view. She could see for miles: rolling grassland, distant mountains, endless sky. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. James came to stand beside her. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Delilah turned to look at him, this man who had changed her life so completely in such a short time. "I am thinking that I could be happy here," she said quietly. "I am thinking that I can see a life here with you. And that terrifies me because it is so fast, because we barely know each other, because it should not be possible to feel this way about someone so quickly." "But you do feel this way," James said. It was not a question. "Yes," Delilah admitted. "I do." James took both her hands in his. "I have been thinking about this constantly since the moment I walked into your shop. I know it is fast. I know we should probably take more time, be more sensible. But Delilah, I am 30 years old. I have worked myself half to death building this ranch, and I have been so focused on survival and success that I have barely taken time to live. Then I saw you in that shop, trying so hard to be brave even though your world was falling apart, and something inside me just knew. This is her. This is the woman I have been waiting for." Delilah felt tears stinging her eyes. "James, I have been so afraid of needing anyone. My parents died when I was so young, and my grandmother died just when I was finally old enough to appreciate her. I learned to rely only on myself because that felt safer. But you make me want to be brave in a different way. You make me want to trust someone else, to build something with someone else." "Then trust me," James said simply. "Trust what we both feel. I am not saying we need to rush into anything. We can take whatever time you need. But I want you to know my intentions, Delilah. I want to court you properly. I want to spend time with you, learn everything about you, and let you learn everything about me. And eventually, when you are ready, I want to marry you. I want you to be my wife." The tears spilled over then, running down Delilah's cheeks. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it, to courtship and to time and to eventually. Yes, James." He pulled her into his arms and held her close, and Delilah felt safer and more at home than she had felt since her grandmother died. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other and looking out at the vast Wyoming landscape. "I have something to show you," James finally said. He took her hand and led her upstairs to a bedroom that was clearly his. A large bed with a simple quilt, a dresser, a washstand, and another large window with a view of the mountains. But it was the room next to it that he wanted to show her. It was empty except for dust motes dancing in the sunlight that streamed through the windows. "This could be whatever you want it to be," James said. "A sewing room, a studio, a place for your work. I know your shop is important to you, Delilah. I would never ask you to give that up. But I thought maybe you could do some of your work here too. You could take commissions from people in the surrounding ranches, or just have a space that is yours, where you can create whatever you want." Delilah walked to the window and looked out. From here, she could see the barn and the corrals and the endless grassland beyond. She could imagine setting up her sewing machine in this room, bolts of fabric arranged along the walls, a dress form in the corner. She could imagine spending her days in town at her shop and her evenings here with James, creating a life that encompassed both her independence and her love for this man. "It is perfect," she said. "This whole day is perfect." They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the ranch. James showed her his favorite spots: a creek where the water ran clear and cold, a hill where you could see 3 different mountain ranges, a meadow where wildflowers grew in the spring. They talked constantly, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Delilah told him about her childhood in Boston, about losing her parents and being raised by her grandmother and sister. James told her about watching his father lose everything, about the determination that had driven him to build something that could not be taken away. They had lunch on the porch, a simple meal of bread and cheese and apples that James had packed. Delilah found herself laughing more than she had laughed in years, relaxing in a way she had not realized was possible. With James, she did not have to pretend to be braver or stronger than she felt. She could just be herself, and that was enough. As the sun began to set, James drove her back to Cheyenne. They held hands on the wagon seat, talking quietly and sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. When they reached her shop, James walked her to the door. "Thank you for today," Delilah said. "For showing me your home, for being so honest with me, for making me feel like I belong somewhere." "You do belong somewhere," James said. "You belong with me. I know that now with absolute certainty." He kissed her goodnight, a long, sweet kiss that made Delilah's toes curl. Then he climbed back into his wagon and drove away, turning to wave at her before disappearing around the corner. Delilah went inside her shop and leaned against the closed door, her heart full to bursting. She was in love. Completely, irrevocably, terrifyingly in love with James Thornton. And the most wonderful part was that he loved her too. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of work and courtship. James came into town every few days, always with some excuse about ranch business he needed to tend to, but really just to see Delilah. They had dinner together, went for walks, and spent hours talking in her shop after closing time. James told her stories about ranch life, and Delilah shared her dreams of expanding her business. They talked about practical things like finances and responsibilities, but they also talked about hopes and fears, and all the vulnerable things that people in love need to share. Delilah met more of James's friends and associates, respectable ranchers and businessmen who all seemed to approve of her. Word spread through Cheyenne that Delilah Crawford was being courted by James Thornton, and while there was some gossip, most of it was positive. James was well liked and respected, and people seemed genuinely happy that he had found someone. The weekend before James was scheduled to leave for Denver, he came into town to collect his suit and to spend time with Delilah before his trip. When he tried on the finished suit, Delilah felt a surge of pride at her work. He looked magnificent, every inch the successful businessman he needed to be. "You are going to impress everyone in Denver," she said, adjusting his collar even though it did not need adjusting. "They will be falling over themselves to invest in your operation." "I hope you are right," James said. "These meetings are important. If I can secure additional investors, I can expand my herd significantly and possibly buy the property adjacent to mine that is coming up for sale. It would nearly double my grazing land." "You will do wonderfully," Delilah assured him. "You are smart and capable, and you have a solid business plan. They would be fools not to invest." James pulled her into his arms. "I am going to miss you," he said. "I will only be gone for 10 days, but it feels like too long." "Write to me," Delilah said. "Tell me how the meetings go and what you think of Denver." "I will write every day," James promised. He left for Denver on Monday morning, and Delilah threw herself into her work to keep from missing him too much. She finished the intricate wedding dress, which turned out to be one of her finest creations. She took orders for 3 new dresses and a vest for one of the shopkeepers in town. Business was good, better than it had been in months, and Delilah felt confident about her ability to pay her rent and eventually save up to buy back her building. True to his word, James wrote to her every day. His letters arrived in bunches, sometimes 2 or 3 at once, and Delilah treasured each one. He wrote about his meetings, which were going well. He wrote about seeing his sister Mary and her husband, and how Mary had interrogated him thoroughly about Delilah. He wrote about how much he missed her and how he could not wait to get home. The day James was due to return, Delilah found herself unable to concentrate on work. She kept going to the window, looking out at the street, watching for any sign of his wagon. When he finally arrived in the late afternoon, she rushed outside before he could even climb down. "You are back," she exclaimed, feeling suddenly shy. "I missed you." "I missed you too," James said, pulling her into his arms right there on the street, not caring who saw. "So much." "The meetings went well, Delilah, better than well. I secured the investment I needed, and I closed the deal on the adjacent property. The Thornton Ranch is going to be one of the largest operations in the territory." "James, that is wonderful," Delilah said. "I am so proud of you." "There is more," James said. He took her hand and led her inside the shop, closing the door behind them. "I have been thinking about this the entire trip home. I know we said we would take our time, but Delilah, I do not want to wait any more. I love you. I want to marry you. Will you be my wife?" Delilah's heart felt like it might explode from happiness. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." James kissed her deeply, holding her as though he would never let her go. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and grinning, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I bought this in Denver," he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold ring with a small diamond. "I know it is not fancy, but I saw it and thought of you. Strong and beautiful and perfect." "It is beautiful," Delilah said as James slipped it onto her finger. "Everything about this is beautiful." They sat together in her shop as the sun set, making plans for their future. James wanted to get married as soon as possible, and Delilah found herself agreeing. Why wait when they were both so certain? They decided on a date 6 weeks away, which would give Delilah time to make her wedding dress and prepare for the move to the ranch. "What about your shop?" James asked. "I meant what I said about not wanting you to give up your work." "I have been thinking about that," Delilah said. "I can keep the shop open in town and hire someone to mind it a few days a week. That way I can still take commissions and see my regular customers, but I can also spend time at the ranch with you. Eventually, if business continues to grow, I might hire a seamstress to work full-time in the shop. I could focus on design and custom orders while someone else handles the simpler work." "That sounds like a solid plan," James said. "You are a businesswoman, Delilah. That is part of who you are, and I love that about you." The next 6 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Delilah designed and created her wedding dress, a beautiful but practical design in cream silk with delicate lace accents. She wanted something she could wear again for special occasions, not an elaborate confection that would hang in a wardrobe forever. She hired a young woman named Emma, the daughter of one of her regular customers, to work in the shop 3 days a week. Emma was eager to learn and had a good eye for fashion, and Delilah enjoyed teaching her the basics of tailoring and customer service. James came into town regularly, and they continued their courtship even though they were engaged. He took her to church socials and introduced her to more of his friends. He brought her to the ranch on Sundays, and Delilah slowly began to feel at home there. She started planning how she would arrange her sewing room and which pieces of furniture she might bring from her living quarters behind the shop. They talked endlessly about their future, about the children they hoped to have, about the life they would build together, about dreams both practical and fanciful. Delilah learned that James wanted at least 3 children, and she admitted she had always imagined having a large family. James learned that Delilah had always wanted to travel and see more of the country, and he promised that once the ranch was well established, they would take trips together. The wedding took place on a perfect October day, with the aspen trees turning gold and the air crisp and clear. They married in the small church in Cheyenne, with Mary and her husband traveling from Denver to attend, along with James's ranch hands and many of Delilah's customers and friends from town. Delilah wore her cream silk dress and carried a bouquet of wildflowers that James had picked for her that morning. James wore the suit she had made for him, and he looked so handsome that Delilah felt her breath catch when she saw him standing at the altar. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, James kissed her with such tenderness that Delilah felt tears streaming down her cheeks. They were happy tears, tears of joy and gratitude and overwhelming love. The reception was held at the hotel restaurant where they had their first dinner together. There was music and dancing and a feast that seemed to go on forever. Delilah danced with James, with his ranch hands, with the shopkeepers and businessmen who had become friends. She laughed until her sides ached and felt more purely happy than she could ever remember being. As the evening wound down, James took her hand and led her outside to the wagon he had decorated with ribbons and flowers. They drove out to the ranch under a sky filled with stars, and Delilah leaned against her husband's shoulder, feeling content and excited and a little nervous about the wedding night ahead. James carried her over the threshold of the ranch house, and Delilah laughed at the tradition of it. He set her down gently in the main room, where a fire crackled in the fireplace, and candles created a warm, romantic glow. "Welcome home, Mrs. Thornton," he said softly. "Home," Delilah repeated, testing out the word. "I like the sound of that." James kissed her slowly, thoroughly, and then led her upstairs to the bedroom that was now theirs. He was gentle and patient with her, taking his time, making sure she felt loved and cherished. Delilah had been nervous about this part of marriage, but with James, everything felt natural and right. They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies, and afterward, Delilah lay in her husband's arms and felt complete in a way she had never felt before. "I love you," she whispered in the darkness. "I love you too," James replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "More than I ever thought possible." Delilah settled into her new life with surprising ease. She found that she loved being a rancher's wife, loved the rhythm of the days and the satisfaction of building something together with James. She kept her shop in town and worked there 3 days a week, with Emma handling things the other days. On the days she was at the ranch, she set up her sewing room exactly as she had imagined it and took commissions from the wives and daughters of neighboring ranchers. Her business continued to grow. Word of her skills spread throughout the territory, and she had more work than she could handle. She ended up hiring 2 more seamstresses to work in the town shop, and she focused on custom designs and difficult projects. She found that she had a talent for creating practical but beautiful clothing that suited the Western lifestyle, and women came from as far as Montana and Colorado to commission pieces from her. But more than her business success, Delilah treasured the life she had built with James. They were partners in every sense of the word. James consulted her on ranch decisions, and she consulted him on business matters. They worked side by side, supporting each other's dreams and celebrating each other's successes. They laughed together, argued occasionally but always made up, and grew deeper in love with each passing day. In the spring of 1883, Delilah discovered she was pregnant. She told James over dinner one evening, and he was so overcome with joy that he picked her up and spun her around, only setting her down when she laughingly reminded him that she was with child and probably should not be spun. "A baby," he kept saying, his voice filled with wonder. "We are going to have a baby. Are you hoping for a boy or a girl?" Delilah asked. "I do not care," James said honestly. "As long as the baby and you are healthy, that is all that matters to me." The pregnancy was relatively easy, and Delilah continued working until she was 7 months along. She made tiny clothes for the baby, soft gowns and little caps, and James built a beautiful cradle from oak wood. They prepared the bedroom next to theirs as a nursery, painting it a soft yellow and filling it with everything a baby might need. In November of 1883, Delilah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas, after James's father, and he was perfect in every way. Delilah held her son in her arms and felt a love so fierce and protective that it overwhelmed her. James looked at his son with tears in his eyes and promised that he would be the kind of father his own father had been before tragedy struck, steady and loving and present. Being a mother was harder than Delilah expected, but also more rewarding. She reduced her time at the shop, going into town only once or twice a week, while Emma and the other seamstresses handled most of the day-to-day operations. Delilah focused on being a mother and on the design work she could do from home. She found that she loved this balance, the way she could pursue her passion while also being present for her son. Thomas was a happy baby who grew into a curious, energetic toddler. James was a devoted father, often carrying Thomas around the ranch with him, teaching him about cattle and horses, even though the boy was too young to understand. Delilah would watch them together and feel her heart swell with love for her little family. 2 years after Thomas was born, Delilah gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine, after her grandmother. Catherine had Delilah's auburn hair and James's blue eyes, and she was a sweet, quiet baby who seemed to observe everything around her with solemn attention. Thomas adored his baby sister and was remarkably gentle with her, always wanting to help care for her, Life at the Thornton Ranch was good. James's business continued to thrive, and he became one of the most successful ranchers in Wyoming. Delilah's reputation as a designer and seamstress spread even further, and she had clients from across the West. She eventually opened a second shop in Denver, hiring a manager to run it while she oversaw the designs and quality from Wyoming. But more important than business success was the life they had built together. The ranch house was always filled with laughter and love. James and Delilah hosted dinners for their friends and neighbors, and their home became known as a place of warmth and hospitality. The children grew healthy and strong, learning to ride horses and help with ranch work as they got older. When Thomas was 6 and Catherine was 4, Delilah gave birth to twins, another boy and a girl they named James Jr. and Elizabeth. The house became even more chaotic and lively, but Delilah and James loved every moment of it. They had the large family they had both dreamed of, and watching their children grow and thrive was their greatest joy. As the years passed, Delilah sometimes thought back to that August day in 1882, when James had walked into her shop and changed her life forever. She thought about how close she had come to losing everything, and how one man's kindness and one decision to be brave had led to this beautiful, full life. She had a successful business that she loved, a husband who was her partner and her best friend, 4 healthy children who filled her days with purpose and joy, and a home that was truly hers. One evening, when the children were all finally asleep and the house was quiet, Delilah and James sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. They held hands, comfortable in the silence between them. "You ever regret it?" James asked. "Marrying me, giving up your independence in town, taking on the life of a rancher's wife." Delilah looked at him in surprise. "Regret it? James, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. I did not give up my independence. I gained a partner. I have my business, my children, this beautiful life. I have everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know I wanted. How could I possibly regret any of it? I just want to make sure you are happy," James said. "That is all I have ever wanted." "I am happy," Delilah said firmly. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be. You saved me, James, not just my business, but me. You showed me that I did not have to be afraid anymore, that I could trust someone else, that I could build a life with someone and still be myself. You gave me everything." "You gave me everything too," James said softly. "You gave me a home, not just a house. You gave me a family and a reason to work for something beyond just survival. You made me believe in love, Delilah. Real, lasting love." They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully. Around them, the ranch James had built and that they now ran together thrived. And between them, the love that had started with a desperate woman and a cowboy who bought her building and asked for a suit had grown into something lasting and true. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Delilah rested her head on James's shoulder and thought about the future. Thomas was already talking about working the ranch with his father when he grew up. Catherine showed signs of having inherited her mother's artistic eye and loved to draw dresses in her notebook. The twins were still babies, but Delilah could already see their personalities emerging. "What are you thinking about?" James asked. "The future," Delilah said. "All the good things still to come. Watching our children grow, growing old together, maybe having grandchildren someday, building on what we have created here." "That sounds perfect," James said. "Although I have to say, watching you chase after 4 children is quite entertaining. I cannot imagine adding grandchildren to the mix." Delilah laughed and swatted his arm playfully. "You are just as much in the thick of it as I am." I saw you yesterday with all four of them hanging off you like little monkeys. I love it, James admitted. Even when it is chaos, even when I am exhausted, I love every moment of being their father. You are a wonderful father, Delilah said, and a wonderful husband. I am so lucky I got to fall in love with you. I am the lucky one, James insisted. I walked into your shop that day not knowing that I was about to meet the woman who would change my entire life. I thought I was just making a business investment and getting a suit. Instead, I found everything I had been missing. They sat together until the stars were fully visible, talking about their dreams for their children and their plans for the ranch and the business. They talked about taking a trip to San Francisco someday, maybe to visit the silk suppliers that Delilah ordered from. They talked about expanding the ranch house to give each child their own bedroom as they got older. They talked about everything and nothing, the way longtime partners do. When they finally went inside, they checked on each of their sleeping children. Thomas was sprawled across his bed, covers kicked off. Catherine slept curled into a tight ball, clutching her favorite doll. The twins were in their cribs in the nursery, James Jr. snoring softly while Elizabeth slept with her tiny fist in her mouth. We made these beautiful people, Delilah whispered to James as they stood in the nursery doorway. We created this family. Best thing I ever did, James whispered back. They went to their own bedroom, the room where their marriage had begun, and where they had spent countless nights talking, making love, comforting each other through difficult times, and celebrating the good times. They got ready for bed and climbed under the covers, and James pulled Delilah close against him. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" Delilah asked. "For saying yes, for making me a suit, for falling in love with me, for giving me this life, for everything." "Thank you for buying my building," Delilah replied with a smile, "and for asking me to make you a suit. It was the best transaction I ever made." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, safe and warm and loved. Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered through the grass, and the cattle settled for the night. The ranch was peaceful and prosperous, a testament to hard work and determination. And inside the house, a family slept, bound together by love that had started with an act of kindness and grown into something beautiful and lasting. Years continued to pass, marked by seasons and celebrations and the ordinary moments that make up a life. Thomas grew tall and strong, learning everything his father could teach him about ranching. By the time he was 16, he was working alongside the ranch hands, earning their respect with his hard work and good judgment. Catherine developed her artistic talents, helping her mother with dress designs, and showing such promise that Delilah began teaching her all the skills her grandmother had taught her. The twins grew into mischievous but good-hearted children who kept the household lively with their antics. Delilah's business continued to flourish. Her shops in Cheyenne and Denver were both successful, and she had developed a loyal clientele that included some of the wealthiest and most influential women in the West. She hired more seamstresses and eventually opened a third location in San Francisco. She became known not just as a seamstress, but as a true designer, someone who understood both fashion and the practical needs of Western life. But despite her business success, Delilah never lost sight of what was most important. Her family came first always. She made sure to be present for her children, to attend their school programs and help with their homework and listen to their dreams and concerns. She made sure to nurture her marriage, to make time for James even when life got busy, to keep the romance and friendship alive between them. James's ranch grew into one of the largest and most successful operations in Wyoming. He expanded his herd, bought more land, and employed over 20 ranch hands. He became involved in territorial politics, advocating for the interests of ranchers and working to bring better infrastructure to the region. But like Delilah, he never lost sight of what mattered most. His family was his foundation, the reason he worked so hard. One evening, when they had been married for 15 years, James came home from a meeting in Cheyenne looking thoughtful. The children were all occupied with various activities, and he pulled Delilah aside to talk privately. "I had an interesting conversation today," he said. "A group of investors from the East is interested in buying the ranch. They made me a very generous offer." Delilah felt her heart skip a beat. "You are not considering it, are you?" "No," James said immediately. "This ranch is not for sale. This is our home, the place where we built our life and raised our children. But it made me think about what we have accomplished, Delilah. We started with nothing, and now we have more than I ever dreamed possible." "We have been blessed," Delilah agreed, "and we have worked hard for what we have." "I want to make sure it lasts," James said. "I want to make sure that when we are gone, our children have something secure. I have been thinking about setting up a trust, something that would ensure the ranch and your businesses stay in the family." They spent the next several months working with lawyers and financial advisors to set up a structure that would protect their assets and provide for their children's futures. It was not something Delilah had ever thought much about, having come from such modest beginnings, but James was right that it was important to plan ahead. As their children grew older, new challenges emerged. Thomas fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a sweet girl named Anna who fit perfectly into the family. Catherine struggled with whether to focus on her art or help more with the family businesses. The twins developed their own distinct personalities and interests, James Jr. showing a talent for numbers and business, while Elizabeth proved to be a natural horsewoman. Through it all, Delilah and James faced each challenge together, supporting their children while also maintaining their own relationship. They still had date nights, still talked for hours about everything and nothing, still made each other laugh. The passion between them had evolved over the years, becoming deeper and more comfortable but no less real. When Thomas was 21, he married Anna in a beautiful ceremony at the ranch. Delilah made her future daughter-in-law's wedding dress, putting all her love and skill into creating something truly special. As she watched her son exchange vows with the woman he loved, Delilah thought about her own wedding day and how young and hopeful she and James had been. They were older now, with lines on their faces and silver in their hair, but the hope was still there. The love was still there. Catherine eventually decided to split her time between working with her mother on dress designs and pursuing her own art. She had a small studio in Cheyenne where she painted, and her work began to gain recognition. Delilah was proud of her daughter's independence and creativity, seeing so much of herself in Catherine. The twins went off to college, James Jr. to study business and Elizabeth to study veterinary medicine, one of the few programs that accepted women. Delilah and James found themselves with an empty nest for the first time in over 20 years, and it was a strange adjustment. The house felt too quiet without the constant noise and activity of children, but they also found that they enjoyed having time for just the two of them again. They took that trip to San Francisco they had always talked about, spending 2 weeks exploring the city and meeting with Delilah's suppliers and clients there. They traveled to Denver to visit Mary and her family. They took long rides around the ranch, just the two of them, reminiscing about the early days of their marriage and dreaming about the future. When they had been married for 25 years, James planned a surprise anniversary celebration. He invited all their children home, along with Mary and her family and many of their friends from over the years. Delilah walked into what she thought would be a quiet dinner, and found a house full of people she loved, all there to celebrate their marriage. 25 years, James said in his speech that evening, his arm around Delilah's waist. 25 years since this woman agreed to marry me. 25 years of partnership, of building a life together, of facing challenges and celebrating triumphs. Delilah, you are still the most beautiful, intelligent, talented woman I have ever known. You are my best friend, my partner, the love of my life. Here is to 25 more years together. Everyone raised their glasses, and Delilah felt tears streaming down her face. She looked around the room at all the evidence of the life they had built. Their 4 healthy, happy children. Their grandchildren, Thomas and Anna, had given them 2 so far. Their successful businesses, their beautiful home, their community of friends and loved ones. It was more than she had ever dared to dream of on that desperate day when the bank notice had appeared on her door. "I love you," she whispered to James. "More every day." "I love you too," he replied. "Always have, always will." As the party continued around them, Delilah thought about the journey that had brought them here. She thought about the scared young woman who had nearly lost everything, and the kind cowboy who had walked into her shop with an outrageous proposition. She thought about the suit she had made for him, which he still had hanging in their closet, worn only on special occasions. She thought about all the decisions, big and small, that had led to this moment, and she felt grateful. Grateful for every challenge that had made them stronger, for every joy that had made their hearts fuller, for every ordinary day of their extraordinary life together. She had been losing her dress shop, and a cowboy had bought it and said, "Now make me a suit." Such a simple thing, really. But from that simple beginning had grown this beautiful, complex, wonderful life. The celebration went on late into the night, with music and dancing and laughter filling the ranch house. Delilah danced with James, with her children, with friends she had known for decades. She held her grandchildren and imagined the life they would have, the opportunities that would be open to them because of the foundation she and James had built. When everyone had finally gone home or gone to bed, James and Delilah sat on their porch, just as they had so many times over the years. The Wyoming night was clear and cool, with stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, the same question he had asked her countless times over the years. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Delilah said. "How one decision, one moment of courage on your part changed everything. You could have just let me fail, James. You could have bought the building from the bank after they foreclosed and got it for less money. But you chose to help me instead. Why did you do it?" James was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "I told you at the time that it was because I understood what it was like to lose everything," he finally said. "And that was true. But if I am completely honest, I think I knew even then that you were special. There was something about you, about the way you stood in that shop trying so hard to be brave, that just reached into my chest and grabbed my heart. I bought the building because it made good business sense, but I also bought it because I wanted a reason to keep seeing you. I wanted to know you better. I wanted to be part of your life." "I am so glad you did," Delilah said. "I cannot imagine what my life would have been without you. Where would I be now if you had not walked through my door that day?" "You would have figured something out," James said with confidence. "You are strong and resourceful and talented. You would have landed on your feet somehow." "Maybe," Delilah said, "but I would not have been happy, not like this, not the way I am happy with you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands and listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch at night. Inside the house, their children and grandchildren slept. Around them, the empire they had built together hummed with quiet prosperity. "You ever think about what happens next?" Delilah asked. When we are older, when we cannot work like we do now. Sometimes, James admitted. I think about teaching Thomas to run the ranch, about watching our grandchildren grow up, about having time to just be together without all the responsibilities. I think about sitting on this porch with you when we are old and gray, looking back on all we have built and feeling satisfied that we lived a good life. That sounds perfect, Delilah said. As long as I am with you, I know I will be happy. Same, James said simply. You are my home, Delilah. Not this house, not this ranch. You. Wherever you are, that is where I want to be. As they finally went inside to bed, Delilah felt a deep sense of contentment settle over her. Her life had not been perfect. There had been struggles and losses and disappointments along the way. But there had also been so much joy, so much love, so many moments of perfect happiness. And all of it, every bit of the beautiful life she had built, had started with a cowboy buying her dress shop and asking her to make him a suit. Years continued to unfold in their natural rhythm. Thomas took over more of the day-to-day operations of the ranch, working alongside his father but gradually becoming the primary decision-maker. Catherine opened her own design studio, partnering with her mother, but also establishing her own identity as an artist and designer. James Jr. returned from college and began managing the business side of both the ranch and Delilah's shops, bringing fresh ideas and modern practices that helped everything run more efficiently. Elizabeth completed her veterinary studies and became the primary veterinarian for the Thornton Ranch and several neighboring operations, breaking barriers as one of the few female veterinarians in the territory. Delilah and James gradually stepped back from the daily responsibilities of their businesses, taking on more advisory roles while their children managed the actual operations. It was a strange adjustment at first, learning to let go of the control they had maintained for so many years. But it was also liberating. They had more time for each other, more time to travel and pursue hobbies and simply enjoy the life they had built. They took a trip back east to Boston, where Delilah showed James the places where she had grown up. They visited her grandmother's grave and the old neighborhood where she had learned to sew. They saw her sister Rebecca, who was now a widow with grown children of her own. Rebecca looked at the life Delilah had built with undisguised envy. "You were right to go west," Rebecca admitted. "I thought you were crazy, throwing away a chance at a comfortable life to chase some dream. But you have so much more than I ever did. You have love, real love. You have a partnership. You have children who respect and adore you. I have security, but you have happiness." The word stayed with Delilah long after they returned to Wyoming. She had happiness. Real, lasting happiness born of hard work and risk-taking and the courage to trust someone else with her heart. On their 30th anniversary, surrounded by their 4 children, their 6 grandchildren, and a house full of friends, James stood and made another speech. He was in his late 50s now, his dark hair mostly gray, his face lined by years of sun and hard work. But his blue eyes were still clear and bright, and when he looked at Delilah, they filled with the same warmth and love they had held 3 decades before. 30 years ago, I walked into a dress shop and met a woman who was trying so hard to be brave, he said. I bought her building and asked her to make me a suit, and in doing so, I got so much more than I bargained for. I got a partner, a best friend, the love of my life. Delilah, you have given me everything that matters. A home, a family, a reason to get up every morning and work hard. You have made me a better man than I ever thought I could be. I love you more today than I did on our wedding day, which I would not have thought possible. You are my everything. Delilah stood and embraced her husband, not caring that everyone was watching, not caring that tears were streaming down her face. I love you too, she said, forever and always. The party was wonderful, with music and dancing and food and laughter. Their grandchildren performed a little play they had written about how their grandparents met, making everyone laugh with their exaggerated portrayals. Thomas and Anna announced that they were expecting their third child. Catherine revealed that one of her paintings had been accepted into a prestigious exhibition in New York. The twins shared stories about their work and their lives, both clearly thriving in their chosen fields. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Delilah found herself standing at the window of her and James's bedroom, looking out at the ranch that had been her home for 30 years. She could see the barn where horses nickered softly, the corrals where cattle moved in the darkness, the bunkhouse where ranch hands slept. She could see the vast Wyoming landscape stretching out to meet the star-filled sky. James came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," Delilah said. "How far we have come, how blessed we have been, how grateful I am for every single day we have had together." "We have been lucky," James agreed, "but we have also worked hard, we have made good choices, we have been there for each other through everything." "Do you remember the suit I made you?" Delilah asked. "The one that started all of this?" "Of course I remember," James said. "I still have it. I wore it to Catherine's college graduation, and I am planning to wear it to Thomas's baby's christening next month. It still fits perfectly, and the quality is just as good as the day you made it. That suit is a testament to your skill, Delilah." "It is a testament to us," Delilah said. "To what we built together. You bought my building and asked for a suit, and I gave you my heart instead." "Best trade I ever made," James said softly. They stood together at the window for a long time, watching the night and thinking about the past and the future. They had many good years ahead of them still, they knew. Years of watching their grandchildren grow, of seeing their businesses continue to thrive, of traveling and exploring and simply enjoying each other's company. Years of love and partnership, and the deep satisfaction that comes from a life well lived. Eventually they climbed into bed, and James pulled Delilah close against him, the way he had every night for 30 years. She rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt completely safe and loved and content. "Good night, my love," James whispered. "Good night," Delilah whispered back. As they drifted off to sleep, Delilah thought one last time about that August day in 1882 when a cowboy had walked into her failing dress shop and changed her life forever. She had been losing everything, standing on the edge of complete ruin. And then James Thornton had appeared like something out of a dream and offered her salvation in the form of a business deal and a request for a suit. But what he had really offered her was hope. Hope for a future, hope for love, hope for a life beyond just survival. And from that hope had grown this beautiful, rich, full life. A life of love and family and success and partnership. A life that was everything she had ever wanted and so much more. She fell asleep with a smile on her face, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the person she was meant to be with. Her dress shop had been saved, yes, but more importantly, her heart had been found, and that had made all the difference.